Welcome, everyone, to New York City's Medical Examiner office, located here in Bellevue Hospital. This particular room we're located in now is the Bellevue Morgue, or as some of my colleagues have fondly called it, the Country Club. Please let me introduce myself. I'm Dr. Charles Norris, the very first Chief Medical Examiner of the great city of New York. I was hired for this lofty position more than 10 years ago, back in 1918. And I pride myself on having established the first modern office of forensic pathology in the country. Before me, the old corrupt system of politically appointed coroners was in charge of investigating murders and conducting autopsies in the city. Many of these coroners were not medical doctors, like myself. They were plumbers, painters, carpenters, butchers, people with no qualifications to be performing autopsies in this great city. These coroners were doing such a poor job and were so corrupt that finally, in 1918, a law was passed in New York City, stating that a qualified medical doctor with expertise in pathology would hold the position of Chief Medical Examiner. And that is how I came to hold this prestigious, but slightly unglamorous position of analyzing dead bodies and performing autopsies, like I will be doing on my deceased friend here in a little while, who I suspect died from poisonous alcohol. And let me tell you, I was hired just in time for this job. Not long after I started as Chief Medical Examiner, Prohibition became the law of the land in the United States, following the passage of the 18th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and the Volstead Act. The 18th Amendment was enacted on January 17, 1920, and it prohibited the sale, manufacture, and transportation of all intoxicating liquors throughout the United States. Not long after, the Volstead Act was passed, which defined an intoxicating liquor as any substance with an alcohol content of more than 1/2 of 1%. This meant that all alcohol, including beer and wine, was now illegal under Prohibition. I have been taking a stand against Prohibition for nearly the past 10 years because Prohibition has made life for the people of New York City far more dangerous. This is because of a flood of poisonous alcohol into our great city. This poison liquor epidemic has taken thousands of lives in the city and has attracted media attention from all over the country. President Hoover called Prohibition a great social and economic experiment, both noble in motive and far-reaching in purpose. The only way that Prohibition is a noble experiment is that it is helping to reduce the number of the unemployed, but in a very deadly way. The Drives, led by the Anti-Saloon League, promised that Prohibition would be some grand social revolution. The Drives promised that Prohibition would make life better for all American families by eliminating drunkenness, which they viewed as the root of all evils. The Drives promised that through Prohibition, all Americans would be happier, healthier, their moral standards be raised, and crime and poverty be reduced. Oh, were they wrong. Let me tell you what happened in this city since Prohibition has become the law of the land. Believe it or not, Prohibition did not eliminate the public's demand for alcoholic drinks. Everyone and their brother is clamoring to get a drink in this city. In fact, most people who drank alcohol before Prohibition are still drinking alcohol now, provided they are still alive. But the alcohol that people are drinking in this city is far more dangerous than it ever was before Prohibition was enacted. The alcohol that people are consuming in the city is poisonous, and it can blind them, paralyze them, and even kill them. My office has been overrun with corpses, just like this poor guy, all due to poisonous alcohol, and the situation is getting worse and worse every year. Now, you may be wondering, who is poisoning this alcohol? Well, under the provisions of the Volstead Act, our own U.S. federal government is poisoning alcohol normally used for industrial purposes to make it unfit for human consumption. The Volstead Act calls for the government chemist to poison or denature this industrial alcohol. And the main denaturing agent that is being used is methanol, or wood alcohol, which is extremely poisonous. 1 teaspoon of wood alcohol is enough to blind someone, as well as 1 ounce of wood alcohol is enough to kill an adult. The federal government thinks that by poisoning this industrial alcohol, by adding chemicals to give the alcohol a bad smell, that they will be able to scare away the public from drinking it. But this is not the case. Bootleggers are diverting this industrial alcohol for sale to the unsuspecting public, who buys this alcohol because it is the only alcohol available through Prohibition. And let me tell you, not everyone has been so supportive of my stand against Prohibition in the past 10 years. Even with the countless number of deaths in New York and across the country due to poisonous alcohol, the supporters of Prohibition continue to fight back and continue to defend Prohibition and the government-mandated poisoning of our country's alcohol supply. One major significant critic of mine is Mr. Wayne Wheeler, General Counsel of the Anti-Saloon League. Mr. Wheeler has repeatedly defended the government's use of methanol, an industrial alcohol, to make it poisonous and undrinkable. Mr. Wheeler has even gone so far as to classify the deaths of people who have died from this industrial alcohol as deliberate suicide, because Mr. Wheeler believes that all Americans should know by now the danger of government-poisoned alcohol. I find it absolutely shocking that Mr. Wheeler can blame the individual for his own unintended death and call it deliberate suicide just because that individual wanted a drink during Prohibition. I believe that it is my duty to inform the New York public of health menaces and substances dangerous to the public's health, such as poisonous alcohol. For this reason, I am opposed to Prohibition, as it has brought a flood of poisonous alcohol into our great city. This is truly an appalling situation that we are faced with under Prohibition. And for this reason, I've been taking a stand against Prohibition and the government-mandated poisoning of our country's alcohol supply. I have been speaking out to the New York public, making a lot of noise to the city's newspapers. I have been writing to city officials and holding press conferences, all just to try to get the word of warning out to the New York public. Now that I got that off my chest, let me show you some of the noise I've been making to the city's newspapers here in New York City. Let's take a walk down to the corner newsstand, and I'll show you all the noise I've been making about Prohibition. Just take a look at some of these newspaper headlines where I have spoken out against Prohibition. Norris warns of blindness and death from wood alcohol, April 1925. Dr. Norris assails poisonings. Norris says government morally responsible for deaths, December 1926. Norris heads fight on impure liquor. Norris finds alcohol a menace, February 1927. Norris warns of epidemic of death from wood alcohol poisoning. Dr. Norris assails dry law fatalities, February 1928. Norris warns flood of poison liquor sweeping the city. Dr. Norris denounces Prohibition as cause of poison liquor deaths, July 1932. I have even taken my stand against Prohibition to a national audience. In 1928, I published an article to the North American Review, a national literary magazine, entitled Our Essay in Extermination. In this article, I argued that Prohibition is not a noble experiment, but instead is an experiment in extermination, because the federal government continues to poison industrial alcohol, even though it knows that many Americans are drinking this alcohol and dying from it. Therefore, I argued that the federal government is knowingly killing its own citizens under Prohibition. Prohibition was supposed to be for the public's own good and improve people's health and well-being. But as you can see, Prohibition has had a fatal impact on the health and well-being of all New Yorkers, and has led to thousands of senseless deaths in New York and across the country. I implore you to take a stand with me against Prohibition and the government-mandated poisoning of our country's alcohol supply before even more Americans will needlessly die. Well, I suppose it's time for me to be heading back to the morgue to see how many more dead bodies have piled up since we've last been talking. They often arrive in groups of 10 or 20 dead bodies at a time, all having died from the same batch of poisoned liquor, and all dying within a few hours of each other. Just another day in New York City under the 18th Amendment. Let's hope the hypocrisy of Prohibition ends very soon. Good day, and stay safe.